But I just have to say that I am very, very pleased to be here. I love speaking to different audiences, and I feel that teaching experience, or rather, not even teaching, but probably sharing experience, is probably the most rewarding one can ask for. So today, I would like to speak to you about two remarkable women. Um, I am. I love to look into the history of Jewish women because I find that a lot of times we don't know a lot of information about women, especially if they are far removed from us in terms of time. And today we are going to talk about two women that are basically removed from us, for one of them at least, um, for 2000 years, for now already a little over 2000 years, I would say. And they are removed from each other for 2000 years. And yet, I dare to say, and hopefully we will look at it together, that these women are much closer to us today than we might imagine. They have a lot in common. Their destinies and their life stories have a lot in common. And there's a lot for us to learn about these two women. Before I start speaking, I would love if you could tell me if just by basically, I'm going to just enlarge the window so to see everyone, just by the show of hands or nods or however, or a sign on Zoom, if any of you ever learned or heard about either of these women, or if you want to just to say, and that was Bruria, or that was Nechama Leibovich, or both? Both. Okay, great. Oh, great. Very nice. So probably it's going to be actually easier to speak. But I see that only two of you, right, mentioned that they know.
Gloria.
Brewery, right. Okay, three. So great. So I will, I hope you don't mind those of you who heard of them or learned about them. I will, I would want to start with just a little bit of time and sort of lineage for Bruria. So Bruria, for those of us who don't know much about her, Bruria is arguably the most brilliant and the most often mentioned woman in the Talmud, which, as we know, is the code of Jewish law. And basically, this is how we live our lives, by the laws that were developed and before Talmud and written down during Talmud and later on. So Talmud naturally was written down by men, one of whom, Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi, actually took the liberty or dared to write down something that was not allowed to write down. And the reason that he did that is because we're talking about the time after the destruction of the Second Temple. And after the destruction, naturally, there was a serious threat to the very existence of the Jewish people as a nation. And a lot of Torah authorities, just like other Jews, were killed, were driven out of the land. And therefore, there was a real threat that not only the people will not survive, but more importantly, in a way, the Torah will not survive. And if the Torah was not going to survive, then certainly the Jewish people would not survive as a distinct nation governed by the laws of God. So the Talmud is a collection of lures and stories and explanations on anything that comes out from Torah, and anything that was passed from one person to the other, from father to son, from teacher to student, and so on. And most of the times, these teachers, of course, and those students, of course, were men. I would say not most of the times, probably 100% of the time, without a tiny, tiny fraction. So Bruria was one of these women who not only is mentioned in the Talmud, but who is mentioned as a scholar and as a legal authority on her own. And just for us to know where did she come from, if you look at this picture, which basically identifies the time of Bruria, you will see that her father, Rabbi Hanania, or some say Hanina ben Teredion, you will see his figure over here. And if you look closely, what it means here, that he was one of the so-called four martyrs, meaning one of four rabbinical authority figures that were tortured and brutally murdered by the Romans. After the Romans crushed the anti-Roman Jewish revolt that was headed by Bar Kokhba as a military leader and Rabbi Akiva as a spiritual leader, both Rabbi Akiva, of course, and Rabbi Hanania ben Teredion were brutally murdered. And Rabbi Hanania was murdered in a way that the Torah scroll was wrapped around his body and was previously soaked in water so that his agony should prolong. So that was her father. The husband of Bruria, and of course, this is a modern picture, and we have no idea how Bruria looked, even though you will see some sort of fainted pictures, but we, of course, have no idea how she looked. I doubt, honestly, that she would be looking like that, but that's what we have at the moment. So her husband, Rabbi Meir, is that very Rabbi Meir Baal Hanes, in whose memory, or in whose zchut, in whose merit, a lot of Jews are reciting prayers up until today, because there are a lot of little prayers. Probably one of the most well-known is a prayer to save oneself from that is immediate threat, and another one to find the lost object. And these both prayers start with, "Oh God of Meir Baal Hanes, help me." So this is a figure that is one of super authoritative figures in the Talmud, and they're saying that any lore that is seen in the Talmud, but without attribution, meaning not like Rabbi Eliezer said, or Rabbi Abaye said, or somebody else, all of those belong to Rabbi Meir. So we can see what kind of ecology, so to say, spiritual ecology, Bruria was brought up with. The reason probably that Bruria is so prominent is because she is not only a good student of her father, of her husband, and other rabbinical figures at the academy, but she is capable of looking towards the problem with a very, very sharp wit. She has an amazing memory, which we see here in this little abstract, when one of the people asked a rabbi to teach a certain book in 3 months. and Rabbi Yochanan actually in defense of why he doesn't want to teach this, why he considers this request outrageous and rude, he actually brings Bruria as a proof, because he's saying that this woman who is brilliant, she has an amazing memory, and even she cannot did not succeed in learning all of these laws in only 3 months, in all of this book in only 3 months. So that tells us that Bruria's wit, Bruria's chokhmah, meaning wisdom, and Bruria's memory actually was legendary. We also have in the Talmud a moment, at least one and possibly more, where the sages are arguing about a certain halachic, certain legal issue, and Bruria and her husband, her brother, I'm sorry, are giving the answers. And in a very, very rare occasion, probably a singular occasion, the sages are actually saying, well, Bruria's answer is much better. The daughter of Hanina's, they don't name her name in that particular instant. They just say the daughter of Rav Hanania ben Teradion had a better answer than the son of Rav Hanania ben Teradion. So we see that she had wit, she had chokhmah, wisdom, and she had reverence to the Lord and to the sages that were obviously the ultimate authority by the law. We also have a story that actually tells us how Bruria was able to interpret certain things in the law with a vast knowledge of the whole Torah, written Torah, the whole prophetic Torah, the whole things that we call Ktuvim, mean Megillot and Psalms, of course, and Kohelet, all of this vast body of literature. Remember, it's very easy for me today to go to a website and trace a connection between one text in the Torah and the other text in the Torah, right? Or later authorities. But our ancestors amazingly had to know all of this by heart. They were able to cite verses from Torah without even attribution, because it was a given that everybody knew. It was a given when you are talking about let sin cease from the land. It was a given that everybody knew that the line was from Psalms. And this is a story that that you have on your screens, that Bruria and Rabbi Meir lived obviously together as a family, and at some point there were hooligans in their neighborhood, and Rabbi Meir prayed for them to actually sort of disappear from the land. And his wife, maybe with sort of a softer woman's heart, you can say, his wife actually reprimanded him. And she said, how can you pray for the death of these hooligans? If you are basing yourself on this verse, let the sin cease from the land, the verse of the Psalms that King David pronounces, why don't you base it on the way that you can read it as let sinners cease, meaning let sin cease at all itself, meaning let a bad person stop his bad behavior and let him become a better person. And Rabbi Meir actually takes Bruria takes her words into consideration, and he does pray that the wickedness be no more, that the sin will be no more, and he prayed to God to have mercy on them, and they repented, meaning they went back to becoming good, upstanding citizens, as we would say, right? And we would see by this example, which I think is very, very contemporary to us, how many times we come across people that are at best annoying us, right? And at worst, even maybe making our lives miserable, even maybe our neighbors, right? Which is exactly what we have here with Rabbi Meir. And sometimes we are at a wit's end, and we can say, oh, let them already disappear from my sight. And this episode teaches us that no matter how serious or how small the annoyance is, the way to deal with it is to look at yourself and to realize that maybe you are not doing something right in the eyes of others. And if someone would be thinking about you, well, let's let her disappear, that probably wouldn't be something that you would love the most. So you're trying to reassess the situation, and you're trying to maybe talk to these people or talk to God, and trying to help them overcome whatever they are doing and become better people. And of course, the same could be said about oneself. We can look at us with the same critical eyes, which we look at other people, which not often happens, and we can talk to ourselves and persuade ourselves to talk to God and for help, and ask, depending how you look at, ask universe, ask God, ask your inner self, ask your friends for help to become better. And that's the moral of this little story about Bruria and the hooligans. Okay. We also know from the Talmud that Bruria was very quick to answer the people that were trying to mock the Jewish religion. Remember, we're in the time where the Jews are at their worst, where they're literally hiding, they're prosecuted, they're not allowed to learn Torah, they are constantly mocked by non-Jews that live in the area, and certainly by the Romans who have the power and who can basically literally stomp their feet on anybody's head. And therefore, an incident like that, when Bruria is retaliating after a heretic is trying to mock her, and we see that a heretic here apparently does know the Jewish text, which is a lot of times the case throughout the Jewish history, because we also know that the apostate Jews, the Jews that were at some point more or less learned, because every Jewish male was at least able to read the prayers, and they listened to the Rabbonim. So they did have a little bit of knowledge, at least, compared to the surrounding nations. Many of these people that converted, for whatever reasons, they converted to, one of the reasons I would say was to get promoted sort of in the society in a religion that was dominant at that time. So here we are at the time where we have both idolatry, widespread idolatry, and the beginnings of Christianity, which is prosecuted as well, but it's also Christianity, as we know, came from Jews. So those were knowledgeable Jews, actually, that decided to sort of go away and make their lives a little easier by not observing all the mitzvot and being being in a different way, live their life in a different way. So we don't know who the heretic was here, but it could be an idol. I would assume it was an idolater at that time. But surprisingly, he does know Ishayahu, and he's saying that how could the barren woman sing? And as we know, this is a verse in Yeshayahu talking about the future times when Jews will come back to Jerusalem and they will be singing, of course, and even the barren woman will sing because she will have a lot of, people around her, a lot of children of her, like, sometimes like, for example, we can make a contemporary example, like Rebbetzin Schneerson, who never had children, but she was a mother to a lot of Hasidim, if not all of them, right? So Bruria here actually tells him that he's a fool. He doesn't know how correctly interpret this verse. So he definitely shouldn't be trying to mock the verse if he cannot interpret it correctly. She's saying, go to the end of the verse where it's written, for the children of the desolate should be more numerous than the children of the married wife, says the Lord. And this is a meaning that a barren woman shouldn't be given a birth to the children who are destined for Gehinnom, like you, the idolater. So I don't think anybody would be taking this reprimand, easily, especially coming from a woman. Here's the guy who definitely tried to mock her as a scholar, as a woman, and a Jewish religion. And he hears the response. There is a very serious, and I would say sad story, which gives the Rabbonim the idea that the proverbs of King Shlomo, that Eshet Chayil, that we sing every time on Friday night, Eshel Chayil Miimtza, right? What is a rare find, or who is the woman of valor? We know it's translated as the woman of valor. How can one find it? Her worth is that beyond that of rubies. And the reason they're saying that this verse can be applied to Bruria is this very interesting and very sad story. And here the picture that we are looking at, by the way, is the grave or supposed grave of Rabbi Meir in Tiberias. Naturally, we don't know where Bruria's grave is, but supposedly this is a grave of Rabbi Meir Baal HaNes. The story goes as follows. One Shabbat, precisely Shabbat, Rabbi Meir was in his synagogue, and he comes back home. And meanwhile, during Shabbat, while Bruria is at home, their two sons die. And she goes to the room where they die, or she was in that room, I would presume, and she covers them with a sheet, and she does nothing. She's sitting waiting for her husband. And when he comes and he asks her, so where are my sons? And she says, well, they went maybe to Beit Knesset. Why don't you eat Seudat Shlishi, which is a third meal on Shabbat, which is a mitzvah meal, which gives you a possibility of saying at least two blessings, the bracha before eating and the bracha after eating. And he eats the meal that she prepared for him. And he asks her again about the sons, and she wiggles her way out of that conversation. And they make Havdalah, which is another blessing that you have to make before the end of Shabbat. They make Havdalah. And after that, when Meir, before even Rav Meir asks a question, Bruria said, my teacher, speaking to her husband, "My teacher, can I ask you a question?" And naturally he says, "Ask." And she says, "Rabbi, before today, some time ago, a man came and deposited something precious with me. And he said that he would come and take it back. Now he has come to claim what he deposited with me. What should I do? Should I give him back this precious thing?" And at which point Rabbi Meir obviously is very surprised, because he knows that his wife is a very learned woman, and she must be asking a question for something, because naturally you have to return whatever was deposited with you. And he says, he answers her in the same fashion, saying, "My daughter, of course you have to return the item to its rightful owner." And she said, "Were it not for your consent, I would have not given it to him. But thank you for telling me." At which point she takes his hand and she goes up to the room where the children are. And she says, she opens it up, and he sees his dead children. And he starts crying, "My sons, my teachers, my sons in the way of the world, and my teachers in the world of the Torah." And he's crying. And at that time, she's saying, "Didn't you just tell me that I need to return this precious deposit to the owner," meaning God? And she gives him a verse from Yov. And Yov, as we know, is probably most tragic book of the Tanakh. And the verse says, "The Lord has given and the Lord has taken away, and may the name of the Lord be blessed." And in this case, Rabbi Meir says, "Thank you very much. You comforted me, and you gave me understanding of Torah, and you gave me an understanding of the ways of the Lord, in which, of course, I have no right to be angry or to claim possession to my sons, because they're not really mine to begin with." So that's a story that gives the Rabbonim the idea that we could say this verse in Eshet Chayil toward Bruria. The last point that I wanted to make about Bruria is to say that her life, despite being an acclaimed woman of scholarship, despite being mentioned a lot of times in Torah, her personal life was, in a way, a tragedy. First of all, we just learned that her father was tortured to death. Her mother was also killed by the Romans. We don't know how. Her sister was sold by the Romans to a brothel, from where Rabbi Meir was able to save her unharmed. And her sons died. They also had another daughter. We don't know much about this daughter. Her name is never mentioned. We know that she was a wife of one of Rav Meir's students. But again, we can only hope that Bruria had relationship with her daughter. And her life ended tragically. I would like to point to a commentary about Bruria, and I am very hesitant in bringing this comment because I'm as of yet not sure whether the story that Rashi brings, and Rashi is of course the preeminent commentator on Torah and Talmud, and he lived right at the time of Crusades, which is a time of great persecution from the Christians, which is also the time of what's called the Dark Ages historically, meaning that the Christians at that time were, should I say, very backwards and very claustrophobic, especially in everything that was concerning women, maybe because Rashi didn't have sons and only had daughters. So he's bringing out of this one sentence, actually one phrase at the end from the incident involving his wife Bruria, he's bringing a story that supposedly happened to Bruria and Rabbi Meir. I'm going to bring you the story, and I'm going to leave it with you to think about on your own, and talk about at the end of our class if you want. There's a line in the Talmud, in the tractate Kiddushin, talking about sexual relationships between men and women, and the line says at some point that people are not allowed to do this and this. Why? Because women have light-mindedness and easily seduced. So the story that Rashi brings is that Bruria was not very reverent to the sages as far as this incident is concerned, as far as this saying is concerned, that women are easily seduced. I personally, I also have a little bit of uncomfortability with that, but supposedly Bruria was mocking the sages for saying this. And Rabbi Meir said, by your life, you're gonna prove this. And he actually spoke to his student who was enticed to seduce his wife, which to me is a very questionable point. That's why I'm not sure where Rashi gets it. But obviously Rashi is a great commentator, and I'm trying to research what happened between the Talmud and Rashi times. And maybe he does base himself on something more than just this phrase. And finally, Bruria does indeed succumb after a long time to seduction. And once she realizes that, she is she goes mad and she strangles herself. And Rabbi Meir at this point runs to Bavel because he cannot live with the embarrassment and tragedy. So I'm going to leave you at this at the moment, and we'll come back to this at the end of the class, if you don't mind. And now we are going to talk about a woman who is much closer to us, really much closer. We can say she died just recently, although time is going so fast that how recently is, 24 years, we don't know. But still, this is a woman that impacted the whole Torah study in Israel and quite possibly the world. And a lot of people, especially men, but a lot of people never heard her name. A lot of people heard the name of her brother, UJA-JCC Leibovich, but not of her. And this is due to her own humility and modesty. The way I put here the question, Ma kasha le Rashi, what is the Rashi's difficulty? Because this question today is well known in probably all the corners of Torah learning world, even if people don't know who the question belongs to. This is the famous question of Nehama Leibovich. For me, of course, it is a pleasure always to compare women from Tanakh with women who were born in the Russian Empire, one way or the other. Nehama Leibovich was born in September 1905 in Riga, which is today a sovereign country of Latvia, but for many, many, many years, centuries even, was going in and out of the Russian Empire. So all of these Baltics countries that are countries today were obviously a part of a Russian Empire at some point, shorter or longer. So, so she was born in 1905, and she was born to a very unusual family, just like the father of Bruria, the father of Nehama Leibovich, who had two children. He was insistent on the fact that both his children are educated in Torah and in secular studies. So he was actually making little quizzes and little competitions for his children all the time to check their learning and to check that they know all the characters. They know the Tanakh back and forth. Again, this is time before computers, so this was their training. She was a very good student, and they lived in Riga until 1919, at which point they moved to Berlin. And we can see here some tension already, because remember, Berlin, 1919. On the one hand, it is probably, arguably, the best place for the Jews to be, especially intellectual Jews. On the other hand, it's the time when the tensions of the dark future are already brewing in that country. So Nehama goes to a university in Berlin, and she does her doctorate there. And she is married at her own will, which is also very strange considering what kind of marriage it was. She's married to her uncle, Yedidia Lipman Leibovich, who is 29 years older than her and is blind. And her family supposedly is not at the chuppah because they cannot understand her. But she later on says that he was the only person who could understand what she was about. And as soon as she finishes her doctorate degree in 1930, they are moving to Israel, at which time 1930, here we go from 1919 to 1930, from the best of times to the worst of times very quickly for the Jews of Germany. And she leaves Germany and with her husband, and she settles in Eretz Israel at that time. And we have to say that she left the country only once in her entire long life. And she left it for the sake of picking up her parents from somewhere and bringing them back to Israel. And she is very disenchanted with the new Jewish approach to Tanakh and to studying Torah. And maybe because of that, in all of her teaching career that basically went up until her day of death, she is not very nice, and she's not looking keenly to people who are trying to prove or disprove Torah with archaeology, modern discoveries. Like I love, for example, when the archaeology, and now more often than before, supports the findings of archaeology, support the texts of Tanakh. And Nehama was against this because she felt that there's no need. There is no need. If you are a student of Tanakh, and if you are a believer in God, you don't even need archaeology. So this new wave of studying Torah by going through archaeological digs or taking tours with Tanakh in hand, which I personally love, was not her way of thinking, because she had a complete emunah, a complete belief in the word of Torah, in the word of God, and in the mitzvot. So she started teaching in Tel Aviv University in 1968. She received their full professorship. But even prior to that, she received the Israeli Prize in Jewish Education in 1956. Because as soon as she arrived, why did this happen? As soon as she arrived in Israel, she started teaching people Tanakh. And the way that she started teaching Tanakh was completely different from anything else that was taught before. First of all, she was teaching everybody. She was an official teacher in the Mizrahi Jewish movement for girls, but she was not only teaching the text of Torah, but she was asking people questions that made the student think about any subject, any pasuk, any sentence from Tanakh. And she would be comparing commentators, starting with Rashi, of course, but other commentators, and she would be asking people questions. And what she did, she made so-called sheets, gilionot, where she asked questions and her students answered these questions in writing. And she checked every single one of them by her hand. And she was sending this, first she was in the classroom, so she was giving it out. But some students in 1948, Rudy, which is just about 12, 13 years after she came to Israel, some students who were out of school already and their learning finished, they did not want to stop. And wherever they went to work, and famously these were people from construction workers and taxi drivers and waitresses and everybody else, they would be sending her answers on her questions. And she would be sending them corrected sheets. She would be discussing with them questions and their ideas. So the way of teaching was very personal. And a lot of people basically felt as they were her students. Famously, she was saying that there are 4 teaching goals for any students. And one of them is accumulation of factual knowledge, which is obviously the text that you're getting from Tanakh. The other is the development of learning skills that are independent to you, because you may be a reader and I may be a listener and someone else may be an analyst. So every one of us has our specific learning skills. I would argue, for example, that a combination of everything is probably the best, but still everyone has someone to write, some don't write. Everyone has their own way of learning and remembering. There should be a love of study, of course, because without the love for the text, without the love of learning, a person cannot achieve even any small destination and not reach any small destination in their learning. And of course, everything should be based on the observance of commandments. So she was definitely grounded in the Torah and mitzvot. She was definitely grounded in the basic observance of commandments. And because of that, probably she was not, as we today may hear, she was not at all a feminist flag post, right? She lived a long life. She lectured everywhere. And at some point, of course, she was approached by many women, close already to the end of her life, by many women who were trying to present her or who were trying to invite her to showcase the feminist case. And she refused. while she agreed and she wanted for every woman to be able to learn Torah and to want to learn Torah, she was against anything that would put her under some kind of an umbrella. She was not a controversial figure. She was not seeking a title of rabbi or anything like that, and even demanded that on her grave, there's only one word written, Morah, teacher. So even people that like distinguished people to which I have greatest respect, like Blue Greenberg, the founder of the modern Jewish Orthodox feminist movement, Jofa, when she approached her, Nehama refused to sort of cooperate. There is a story, however, that puts this controversy in a little bit of a perspective. Rabbi Riskin, an American rabbi whose name you probably heard, he lives in Efrat, and he's probably one of the beacons of modern Orthodox rabbinate. When he established his learning institution in Efrat for male students, of course it was, or some later on it became for both male and female. But when he established this institution, he actually invited Nehama Leibovich to teach. But this was really a religious institution, which was co-sponsored by Agudat Israel. And Nehama obviously agreed because she was teaching men and women for many, many years already in different capacities. She was traveling throughout the country. She was talking to soldiers. She was going on kibbutzim. The only place she didn't go, as I said, she refused to travel out of Eretz Israel for teaching. She felt that Torah should be taught in Hebrew and on the Jewish soul. So she agreed. At which moment, the head of Agudat Israel, Rav Pam, a very distinguished rabbinical figure, said that he's going to pull out all the Aguda students if a woman will be teaching Torah. So he basically threatened the harem on the yeshiva and on the teacher. And Nehama, being her very humble and very modest self, she quietly came to Rabbi Riskin and quietly offered to resign without any fanfare. And Rabbi Riskin actually disagreed, and he came across the fact that the Aguda has pulled their students, which was probably almost a half or at least 40% of the student body. But surprisingly and remarkably, the next year saw the expansion of that yeshiva almost twice. Nehama is saying, and I want to just give you a couple of more stories, that the student should, looking for these, being under the sort of the roof of these 4 teaching goals from the teacher, the student has an obligation to learn. So if the student doesn't have, for example, the love of study or the understanding that the learning has to be in depth, it's going to be the student's problem if a student is not picking up the material significantly or deeply enough. For example, she's saying in her book on the studies on Bamidbar, the lack of thought content, the dearth of a religious message, must be traced to the incapacity of student in failing to detect the eternal insignificance underlying their apparent, really technical historical details. If it seems a vain thing, it is your fault, which means that she's saying that if a student is unwilling to understand a certain passage and is saying that this passage is insignificant, it doesn't have death, it means that the student did not understand it correctly. And they have to relearn and they have to restudy. And interestingly, when she was rejecting the geographical and archaeological dimensions of studying, as I said, she was saying that a person who is in distress, a person who is, let's say, on their deathbed, and who learned the text and who appreciates the death, is much more equipped to understand Psalms saying like, the Lord is my shepherd, for example, than a person who is an agricultural worker, so to say, shepherding the sheep from the actual textual meaning of the text. I just want to bring you a couple of really nice, beautiful anecdotes, I think, from the life of Nehama Leibovich as a teacher. We were just reading the Torah portion of Korach just a couple of weeks ago, right? And there's a moment where Datan and Aviram do not come to Moses and they say, we're not coming, lo nale. So based on this, there's an interesting story, just because we read this portion just recently, that I wanted to say. She was teaching a Parshat Korach to a class of elementary students, so little kids, and she called upon a student to read a verse first, where Datan and Aviram showed their defiance to go to Moses. So the student read it in like a very lethargical voice, okay, la 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 la, sort of, and she asked him then to get up and say the same thing in front of the whole classroom. And the student actually stomped his feet and said, "Lo nale," not coming. So she was, with this type of teaching, with this type of acting, and with this type of internalizing, she was able to bring the Torah and the ideas behind it to life, whether these were little children or whether those were, grown-up people. There are stories about regular people writing to her saying how for over 20 years they were learning with her, and they were indebted to her because her way of teaching regular people enriched their lives tremendously, and enriched not only their understanding of Torah, but their ability to understand every single situation. Comparative to Bruria, again, Nehama Leibovich didn't really have a very happy married life, a very fulfilled life as a woman. And despite all of that acclaim that she had during her life, because she was very, very well known, and she was praised by a lot of people, even the government of Israel, as I said. She actually confided that she would have given it all up to have children. She obviously birthed her husband much earlier than she died herself. And even when she retired, she went on teaching in her very small apartment, 2-room apartment in Jerusalem. And people are saying that they were amazed when they came to her to realize how humble and how modest she really was. There are famous stories of her donating her money and her clothes, even the new clothes that she bought for herself, to people in need. And being as modest as she was refusing pretty much every interview, saying, "I am not a museum. if you want to learn what I have to say, read my books and study my Torah, which is something that I feel not too many contemporary teachers, scholars, or rabbinical authorities say about themselves. We live in a time where it seems like every one of us wants to get more publicity, more exposure, more acclaim. And Nehama certainly was not a person like that. So even though she didn't have children, as you see here at her funeral, her nephew said that she didn't have children, but if you feel like I do, that you are a child of Nehama, you're a son of Nehama, please join in the Kaddish. And lots and lots of people at this point got up and they said Kaddish for the teacher, for Nehama Leibovich. So here I just wanted to bring you a couple of pictures. Here she is with her brother, not her husband, but with her brother. And here she is with in her apartment teaching Torah. And this is just her passport picture. So what I wanted to say in conclusion, why did I bring these two women together? It feels to me that these two women, being unique in what they were doing in their time, deserve not only our understanding and our reverence, but more importantly, probably, they deserve that we, as their descendants, learn more, try to understand more, and try to internalize Torah more in their merit, and frankly, in our own merit, and then the merit of our children, grandchildren, and God willing, descendants that will come after us. Today, it is much easier to learn Torah than in times of both Bruria or Nehama Leibovich, in one sense, because we have more exposure, we have more possibilities. Women certainly have all kinds of possibilities to learn Torah, especially if we are on the computer, but also with teachers, whether you subscribe to a female title of Rabbi, where you subscribe to a woman who is just a teacher or just wants to remain a teacher, and that's enough in terms of titles. Whether you are just reading on your own with Hivruta or in many organizations that are allowing you and helping you to learn, it's a possibility for us. On the other hand, we live in the time where we have so much distraction and so much noise in our lives because precisely of the use of technology, and because we're bombarded with news, good and unfortunately not so good every day. So it might be a little more challenging, but I encourage you to basically stay accountable to yourself, most importantly, and to the history and to the tradition of our people, and to seek help in learning, in understanding if you need it, or to give help in learning and understanding if you are able to do so. I think my time is up, but I would love to take a minute, if possible, to answer your questions and hear your comments if you have. I would really appreciate any of those. Thank you.
I would like to thank you. I've heard about Nehama Leibovich for years. I've heard her quoted in Devar Torah. So I appreciate that, and I really like the connection with Berea. But I want to say that about 30 years ago, I called about studying Talmud. I saw an ad that said Talmud for beginners. And when I was called about it, I was told that it really wasn't for me, that I wouldn't be interested in it.
Oh, that is so sad. I am so sorry. Oh, but
But it was who I called. I called Ultra Orthodox, had the ad in the paper. And
you know, I have to tell you something. Um, I kind of belong to that camp in a way. And I have to tell you, there are a couple of organizations that if you don't, first of all, there are less orthodox organizations where you could call, and I would gladly give you the names if you want.
no,
But
no, I have outlet to it if I want it. I was just telling you, it really wasn't all that long ago.
But I am learning with my teacher in Partners in Torah, actually. And that is an ultra-Orthodox organization, as you can say. And maybe I was just lucky because I'm learning with my teacher for the last 9 years. And we learn Tanakh, but we do delve in Talmud quite a bit. And she's also obviously a female teacher.
Huh? She. You're learning with she.
Yes, she is definitely an ultra-Orthodox woman, but she's open enough. I guess I might have been lucky. But
no, it was just, there are opportunities.
Of course.
And I learned through that telephone call, I learned in a different group that I was welcome at.
Mm-hmm.
And I really learned a lot about Judaism and what to do and what not, what you couldn't, and all of that. And I must say that the whole experience really taught me why I joined the Reconstructionist congregation.
Well, I happen to think that to each their own. And I am personally a big proponent of an idea of Limud as such. I don't know if you ever heard of Limud as an organization, but regardless, I think that the more we Jews talk to each other and learn from each other, regardless of the label, the better we are as people, the better we are as nation together, and quite possibly the better we are in the eyes of the world. Because all of our bickerings and all of our, I'm not going to step my foot in that synagogue, is frankly damaging each one of us personally and the whole Am Israel. So it is my personal opinion. I don't know if I would be able to bring, let's say, a Haredi rabbi and a Reconstructionist rabbi together. I doubt it, but I wish that this happens one day and we actually talk to each other.
I know rabbis of different congregations, Orthodox, Reform, Conservative, and Reconstruction, who study together.
Beautiful.
Yeah,
beautiful.
That's right.
Beautiful.
Yulia, thank you so much. That was just wonderful. So much information, and you just have so much, you shared so much so deeply with us, and that hour just flew by. So thank you so much. I don't know if anybody else has another question or would like to unmute themselves and thank Yulia before we sign off today.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. I learned so much from you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes. It's been a wonderful hour, and Claudia, you hit it again.
Great. Yeah.
It's just been great. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. I really appreciate talking to you. I'm just, I have to say, I'm always speechless when I speak to the audience of people of my parents' age, because I know how, regardless of where you were, how uneasy or plain hard your lives have been. And I am in awe of the fact that you still want to learn, you still want to enrich yourselves and others. And frankly, I am quite speechless at looking at you all. Thank you so much.
So lovely.
Thank you.
All right, everybody. Have a good afternoon, and we'll see you next week. And
Yes.
we are looking at doing Lunch and Learn back in person beginning of September. So we will be in touch with you as to how we would roll that out. Don't worry for the people that are far away and cannot make it. We will still have the Zoom option. But we will be in touch with you and let you know how that's going to roll out, because you might have to sign up for it beforehand. Okay, so we'll keep you posted. All right, everyone, have a good afternoon. Bye-bye.